resume the recording. Very good. All right. Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see what we're talking about today. Hopefully we can see that okay. All right, great. So welcome everybody. The title of today's presentation is Stop Doom Scrolling. That sounds scary, doesn't it? Slow the scroll with really simple syndication. So I was just talking a minute ago about the fact that Christy Sommerfeld was our CE person here. And she asked me one day when we were brainstorming ideas for sessions, she's like, all right, so you're a geek and there are like geeky things that you do. Are there any geeky things that you do that the library geeks would be interested in seeing? I had to think about it. But this was the topic that came to mind. So this is a thing that I've been using for a long time, and I didn't really realize the impact it had on how I interact with the internet in total until really just recently. And, you know, recently is kind of relative. So my name is Chuck Henry. I'm the Integrated Technologies Coordinator for the Northern New York Library Network. I'm the head geek, as it were, here at the network. For those of you who are involved in historic newspapers, you've probably worked with me at one point or another, or at least a passing familiarity with me. And you understand that I'm not a terribly serious person. So as we move through this presentation, please keep in mind, I'm not a very serious person. And so I have a tendency to off the cuff things. So at any point, if I say something really weird, message us and let us know that, you know, maybe Chuck should stop giving presentations. So anyway, let's talk about doom scrolling. This is a great, scary phrase, and it causes people to think twice when they see it. And let's first of all talk about what's doom scrolling. So doom scrolling is that idea where if you have a phone or a website, you spend time just scrolling down that app or down that website, looking for the next piece of bad news, looking for what's next, looking for what's in that app. And people do it obsessively. I was just at a play that one of my kids was in, and during each like scene change, a sea of phones came out of pockets and people started scrolling through Facebook just during scene changes. And I thought it was crazy to watch, but that's what people were doing. They were obsessively checking to make sure that they had the latest news. And it's not necessarily doom scrolling when you do it that way. But technically what doom scrolling is the idea that you're spending a lot of time just to see what's next, what's horrible, what's going on. It's technically a version of the mean world syndrome, and you're probably familiar with the mean world syndrome. If you watch the news and you see only bad news on the news, bad things going on, then what's going to happen is you're going to expect that that's what the world is really like, because you'll see nothing but bad news. I call it the Fox News syndrome. And I understand, like I said, I'm a very informal person. I'm going to pick on Fox News. I'm also going to pick on CNN. Fear not. I am an equal opportunity, sarcastic monster. So the idea is that if you're watching Fox News, you get the feeling that the world is the way Fox News portrays it to be, even though that may not be true. In the old days, they used to call it the mean world syndrome, the idea that you would watch the evening news. The evening news was always filled with the bad things that went on in the world, and therefore the world must be inherently bad because you see it on TV all the time, right? Well, that is part of what this is about. Also, doom scrolling has this thing built in that plays on negativity bias. Negativity bias is the idea that negative events have a huge impact on your psyche, but yet good ones don't have quite as much. So you can watch, you know, in the case of the evening news, you can see 6 or 7 or 8 stories about how the world is awful, but that one story they leave you with at the end of the day, that's, you know, the good thing that happened in such and such a school or such and such a location doesn't necessarily wipe away the things that you just watched. So that's what doom scrolling is. And, I think doom scrolling has become very prevalent, especially in the last, say, 4 to 6 years. And so we'll talk a little more about that in a minute. So doom scrolling is part of it. But the other part that's to blame for this, is social media. Social media has a really interesting effect on the idea of doom scrolling. So social media loves to have you infinitely scroll. So they make money from the idea that you're viewing advertisement and you're viewing sponsored posts, meaning that a company has asked, or a person or a politician or a political group has asked that a post become more popular and be viewable to more people, have more eyeballs attached to it. But the only way that they can make that happen is to make you stay on that app. They want you to spend time scrolling through their stuff. And so they've built their websites and they've built their apps in such a way that you have to scroll through them. And part of it is just because there's so much stuff coming into those apps from all over the world, but also they purposely take some of the content that they think you want to see and they intersperse it with their advertisements, with their sponsored content. And so that makes you have this kind of instinctual need to scroll through more stuff to see the things that you actually care about. And so in a way, it creates this weird endorphin feedback loop, because you scroll and you see something you like and you spend a little bit of time interacting with whatever that thing is. And then you scroll on and you scroll and scroll and scroll until you find the next thing. And then you get that little endorphin rush of, ooh, I found something else. And so it creates this kind of addictive thing. Now you can see if you add that with the negative news aspect of this thing, it creates a situation where a person could be actively damaging their mental health by touching that app. Now I'm going to interject my own personal feelings about this and how it has impacted me. I don't know about you folks, but in 2016-ish, let's say, I started having a really negative effect with social media, meaning that after Trump was elected, I will admit it, I was not a happy camper about the thing. And I spent a lot of time on Twitter and on Facebook scrolling through posts to see what horrible, horrible thing was going on next. Our president at the time was going out of his way to be a jerk about some things, and he was putting that on Twitter, and people were commenting about it on Facebook. And I felt personally that I was kind of going down this depressive road of constantly scrolling to see what horrible thing was happening next. Now, the solution for me was I just killed my social media. I canceled my accounts on Twitter. I canceled my accounts on Instagram. I canceled my account on Facebook. I have right now, functionally no social media whatsoever. And it made a huge impact on my psyche. I'm a happier person for not having social media. That's great if you can do it. But a lot of people just can't. The question you're asking yourself is, delete social media, but I need to know what's going on. Give me my news. Well, I humbly submit RSS as a way to get your news without participating directly in social media, okay? And that's what the slow the scroll is going to be about. So what is RSS? Okay, RSS stands for, and there's a couple of different interpretations of the abbreviation, but really simple syndication is the one that's most common. So basically what an RSS feed is an RSS feed is a XML file that's automatically generated by a website, and it lists just the new content that's on the site. So if you are a user of WordPress or Drupal or Joomla or any of these content management systems, That RSS functionality is baked into the product. It's part of what they do automatically. And in fact, most people aren't even aware, if they're running a WordPress site, for instance, that there are RSS feeds built into the structure. So here's how it would work. Say, we'll pretend for a second that I have a blog, and it's a blog about being a grumpy old tech guy. And I write a new entry as a grumpy old tech guy. And I title it, why I like cake. And I write a rather detailed 400-word essay on why cake is the best thing in the entire universe. And I include a photo or two. As soon as I click publish, so I'm publishing it to my website, as soon as I click publish, WordPress will automatically generate a new XML file that's the RSS feed, and it will list the title, a little bit of metadata about that entry, for instance, who posted it, when it was posted, usually a text summary, sometimes the whole of the entry. If I attached a beautiful picture of cake, the picture of cake appears there as well. So all of that appears as part of that text feed. So that creates that aspect. So then if there's somebody out there who really wants to know what grumpy old IT guys say, they can subscribe to my RSS feed on my website. They don't need to visit my website. They can just subscribe to it. And that RSS feed, which is usually these days XML, has that data in it, okay? It's one of those things where this system, because it is so kind of in the background, you don't really notice that it's present. I was shocked when I started researching for this that RSS comes from 1996. That's 26 years ago. Can you picture anything else that's 26 years old in the IT universe? Well, there aren't many things. HTML, you can make an argument, is more or less the same, I guess. But why do we still talk about RSS? Well, these days it's been repurposed for podcasting. If you're one of those folks that has a pod listening app on your phone, or if you still have an iPod, or you use it through a website, even Spotify to some degree has that functionality built in. That is still RSS. If I decide I'm going to start a podcast, I start a website that has podcasting capabilities involved. I record a new episode. The new episode gets an XML in my feed as part of RSS. And then people's podcasting apps can then talk to that RSS feed and pull down a copy of my most recent episode. So the technology is still there and still serving a purpose. But why is this old technology, and it is old technology, useful to fight doom scrolling? And there's really, I think, three big ones. First of all, that RSS reader that you're using absolutely has to have a list of sites that you configure. You have to add them to that app. Some apps will add a default set for you, so you've got a little bit of things that you can look for and see when you first start it up. But for the most part, you have to be the one to add it. So that means you're adding sites that are meaningful to you. Why is that important? Well, you can customize what you're looking for to your interests. I'm a board gamer. I have board game feeds available. Maybe you're a knitter. Maybe you like to have all the new stuff going on in the knitting universe. You can do that. You're collecting news of a category that's important to you. So you don't want to see the current political news? Don't subscribe to a current political news website. Easy enough for that. The other thing that's fun about this is that once you read an update, once you see an update for a website, it disappears. It's gone. It gets removed from your feed. So say, for instance, you have 10 websites you follow, and each website only updates, say, 3 times a day. You're only going to have 30 things to look at. Once you've seen all 30 things, you're done. You can close the app and walk away. Okay? So those are my big reasons for it. It's an easy way to stop the scroll because you're not going to be interacting with that app forever. You're only interacting for the period of time until you see all the entries that are there, and then it goes away. So what do you need to be able to do this whole RSS thing? Well, first of all, you're going to need an app. The application is usually called a reader. Back in the bad old days, and I sound horribly old here, but Google once upon a time had a Google feed reader. They used to call it Google Reader. And unfortunately, like all Google projects that are absolutely useful, they go away. So Google pulled the plug on Reader a number of years ago. And so I spent a lot of time hunting around for alternatives. And there are basically 3 categories of alternatives. I will give you some suggestions, but honestly, if you go to Google or DuckDuckGo or your search engine of choice, and you type in RSS feed reader, you're going to get a boatload of options. Okay, and they run the full gambit. And let's talk about some of the 3 main categories of those. The first one I put there is web-based. So the idea is it's a website that you visit. You then give it the feeds that you're interested in. And when you go to that website, it will then pull in the feeds for you, all of the new items, and you can just cycle through them and look at them right on the screen. Some of these are paid sites, some of them are not. For instance, I use Feedbin, and I'll show you what Feedbin looks like in just a minute. But some of them are free, like Feedly, I believe, has a free account where you can just sign up and use it. They do have a little bit of ads in the sidebars, but they also have a paid account. So if you want, you can use a paid version of the app, which has a lot more features. I've never used InnoReader, for instance, but I hear it's really awesome as well. So those are some options. Feedbin and Feedly and InnoReader actually have an additional feature that's really fun, and I'll talk about it in just a minute. Desktop applications, it's just what you think. If you're an Apple user, hit that Apple Store. You can find in the App Store 2 or 3 or 4. So they're out there. If you are a person who is big into open source software, if you search for open source RSS feed readers, there's a number of those as well. So a desktop application is the idea that it would run on your computer. So that way, if you're sitting at your computer, you can just check the news and see what's going on using your RSS feed reader. The last category is mobile applications. And so mobile applications are just what you think they are. They're apps that you run on your phone where you do exactly the same thing. Now, what's interesting, and the reason I mentioned Feedly and Feedbin and InnoReader is that some mobile applications actually have the ability to connect from the phone to that web-based interface. So in this case, I use Unread, and Unread doesn't actually go and get those feeds itself. Instead, it talks to Feedbin and goes, hey, what does Chuck have in his queue to read? In which case then I can bounce back and forth between the two. So I could be sitting at my desk and read my new entries on Feedbin. But if I want to, I can get up from my desk with my phone and wander around and sit in a comfy chair someplace and read the rest of my entries. And if I read them on the phone, they disappear from the web interface. Or if I read them on the web interface, they're not on my phone anymore. And it makes for a nice experience because I can read wherever I want from a single account. Unread can do several different applications, not just Feedbin, Feedly, and InnoReader, but there are others available as well. If I wanted to, I can set up my phone so the feeds go directly to the phone and not the web at all. If you don't want to use the web-based item, you can do it that way as well. So that's kind of a little bit of an overview. The other thing you're going to need is you're going to need websites that actually have RSS feeds available. That's a little trickier, and I'll explain some methods that I use to find RSS feeds and poke around on them. That being said, some of the web-based apps at the top, like Feedly, for instance, Feedly will actually has like a directory that you can hunt for new feeds if you want from them. And it's kind of like a fun little directory. It's kind of the same lines as Spotify, where Spotify will suggest music to you. Feedly will actually suggest feeds to you that you might find interesting. So let's go poke around a little bit. So the first thing I wanted to show you is what an RSS feed looks like raw. I said it was an XML file. For instance, this right here is the RSS feed that our website, my organization's website, creates. This is nothing that we maintain. This is just the RSS feed as it comes out of the software, and we're using WordPress in our case. And as you can see, it's just a pretty standard XML. I mean, it's pretty much as you'd expect, but it's got things like the link to the page, the feed location, when this whole file was built, if there's images involved, and then it gets into the stuff about the articles itself. So this is a little bit of a view of what one looks like natively. I'm bouncing back and forth between browsers because Internet Explorer, yeah. Oh, what am I? What year is it? Chrome has a tendency to display XML files natively to the screen, but if I show it to you in Firefox will just download the file, and that's not terribly interesting to look at. So let's pop over to Firefox. So what you're looking at right now is this is actually my personal Feedbin account. So this is the thing that I've been using every day for 5 years or so. And basically what it is you've got over here on this side, these are websites that have RSS feeds associated with them. And what it happens is that the site goes out and it finds them and it lists next to them the number of posts. So for instance, and I'm going to use this as an example, if I've got North Country people on the call, this is North Country Now, you know, the wonderful North Country website that contains all of our news. And you'll notice there's 27 new posts here. If I click on North Country Now, what I get over here is a list of all the new things that have happened on North Country Now since I last went looking. And so if one of these things looks interesting, I can click on it. And then what appears in the main window now is the article. So I have Veterans Day letters for vets, and I've got a little bit of metadata from the website, and then the article. And if there's any images associated with it, here are the images that go with. Now, I'm looking at it inside of the reader. So in a way, sometimes what you'll see is like half a page or half a link or half of whatever the thing is. You won't see the whole article. If I want to see the whole article, I can click on the title and it'll pop it in a new window. In which case then I can look at it on the website as it appears. So I can close the tab again and go back here. Now, when I move down the page, you'll notice that the one at the top here has suddenly become gray. And it's because I've read it. I no longer need to see it. And so it'll turn gray. And as I move through these and look at some of these things and decide that I like or don't like, or I can skip over the thing, I can kind of skim through. So what this is interesting for is you can kind of go, Messina man faces fennel, I don't care. Ogdensburg man, I don't care. I don't know. Final fish fry of the season at Ogdensburg Knights of Columbus. Yeah, I'm interested in that. So I'll click on it and see it. In which case you'll notice that if I move on to the next one, it grays out again, but I can look at it and I can go bop out and see the actual page if I want to read it up close and personal. North Country Now is a little janky in that I don't actually see the text of anything. I have to go to print mode to do it. Something about the way he's got it set up. So that's how I can browse through. Now you'll notice as I'm browsing through, as I read things, they end up disappearing, they get reduced from my number. And say, for instance, I've skimmed through all the rest of these, the police blotter and the news from St. Lawrence and all of this stuff. I can, when I'm done with this one, I can click read. Mark North Country Now as read. Yep, I'm done with North Country Now. In which case you'll notice the number disappears from the sidebar. Well, now I can just bop onto the next one I want to read. And you'll notice North Country Now disappeared. There's no new news available, so I don't have to have it on my list anymore. So now I can bop over here and start reading other things, of which there's plenty. to read. Okay. So that's basically what a news reader does for you is that once you've decided you've seen something, you've looked at it long enough to go, oh yeah, that's interesting. You move on to the next thing, whatever it happens to be, and it disappears. So in this case, my Feedbin, I use Feedbin. This is the name of the website. Feedbin, this is actually a subscription site, meaning I pay $25 a year. Yeah, that's a lot of money, $25 in a whole year to have access to this particular site. There are free ones like Feedly, so you can do it that way. What I wanted to show you, and it's kind of fun, is here's the app. So what I have here, give me just a second. There we go. So you can see my phone. Somebody give me an indication that you can actually see it. Anyway, I'm going to assume you can. So this app is great. Thanks, guys. So this app is unread. This is actually running on my phone. So what you're going to see here is actually the same content that was on the other reader. So Feedbin, you can kind of get an email feel for it. This is a little different in that at the top, I have the full number of unread articles, but I can also go into the categories here, which they call tags in this one. And I have blogs and photos. And if I go into blogs and photos, I can see stories the same way. Now, what's fun about this particular app is that as I scroll by something, it will mark it as read. Okay, so it'll disappear off the main list of things as I go, because now it's being marked as read as I see things. And again, same deal as usual. If I want to see more about a particular article, I can tap on it and it will open it into a screen so I can read it. And so I get a chance to read through the article. And if I still want to drill deeper and go to the actual website where the thing is located, I can tap the title and it'll open up a browser, in which case then I can read the article directly from the item. So I'm going to go back to my feed reader, and this is all gesture based, so I can just kind of scroll through it as I want. So if I get to the bottom of the scroll, one of the things I can do here too is I can say scroll up and it says mark all as read, in which case it goes away entirely. And then I can move on to whatever my next item is. So what I was telling you too is while this one talks with Feedbin, and in fact, I can go back to Feedbin and refresh Feedbin, and now the category that I had previously is missing because I've cleared it. This one actually also has the ability to do individual accounts. So I can add stuff to the phone, specific to the phone, that's separate from the Feedbin account. So if you wanted to use this app, you could just add an account, add a local account. I'm going to call this test, because everything good in the universe is named test. And if I go to local, so what it's going to do is you can actually add subscription or add suggested feeds, so they can make some up for you. So I'm just going to do this. Ooh, and they found 100 interesting articles for me. So this is just an example of how this works with the web interface one. One of the things you'll want to know is, well, Chuck, how do I find new things to read? So you can use Feedly or one of those that gives you suggestions where it has a directory, but also you can find RSS feeds on all sorts of sites. So for instance, this is How To Geek. How To Geek is one of the sites that I subscribe to and use regularly. Basically, it's nerdy junk. But it's one of those things where if you look at the site, nothing says to you, oh, well, this has an RSS feed. Very often what you need to do is scroll all the way to the bottom. And usually places like How To Geek especially have an RSS feed link. You'll notice that there's a symbol that's the dot and the two radiation lines moving away from it. I used that in the presentations deck. Christy used it in the advertising that went out. That's the official RSS feed symbol icon. And if you see it, that's typically what it means, is that there's an RSS feed available. So in the case of this one, I can actually click on our RSS feed, and it gives you some buttons where you can automatically add them to various things like Feedly and InnoReader and something called News Blur. I don't know what a News Blur is, but it gives you an idea of where that is. So some sites advertise where their RSS feeds are. Some sites, it's a little harder. So again, I am not advocating CNN nor Fox News or anyone else. I'm using this as an example. Say, for instance, you really want to include a real news site. I put air quotes around it. Maybe you can't see them. Air quotes around real news site. I want to include a real news site in my feed of things that I'm looking at. Well, that's possible. CNN does a great job of hiding their RSS feeds. They're here, but where are they on this page? It's hard to find. One of the things that's super useful for this type of thing is going to Google or DuckDuckGo or whoever your favorite is and searching for just feeds and see what comes up. In the case of CNN, they have a website, a particular web page dedicated to just their stuff, and they've split them out by category. So for instance, I'm really interested, say, in the entertainment feed here. I can go to the entertainment feed, copy the link, and then go back to my feed reader, click add, and paste that baby in there. In which case, it goes, hey, CNN, I know where this is. Where do you want to put it? In my case, I'm going to put it in culture and news. I'm going to say add. And now over here, I now have a CNN feed just for entertainment news. So if I want to know what Jimmy Fallon is up to next, I can do that. See? So in that case, CNN has a really nice feed set. That's how you can do it. For instance, you want to see Fox News's RSS feed. They have one as well. In which case they have a bunch of ones as well. So let's not do the opinion one, let's do tech. So I'm going to copy the link to tech, go back over to my feed reader, click add. In which case I get the name of the feed. I'm going to add it to news again as well. And I'm going to say add. In which case now I get all the Fox News I could ever hope for, which isn't much. So anyway, that's how you add some feeds. One of the things I wanted to show you really fast, although I was kind of disappointed to not have an example for you in the feed list down here, is I actually subscribe to work-related things, because that's really what you're asking about is, Chuck, how can I make this usable for my professional life? And there's actually a couple of ways to do that. Hang on, let me go to subscription. I have some in this feed list that are professionally based. So I keep things like websites that have something to do with the work that I do here, so nerdy stuff, server maintenance, that type of deal. But I also keep things like New York Heritage. New York Heritage is our digital repository for objects. It's a website that we use quite a lot. The front end is Drupal, so there's an automatic built-in RSS that we don't even have to maintain. I also keep the Informed Librarian. This is a service that we provide to our members here. The Informed Librarian is kind of a weird kind of a weird one because it doesn't necessarily live update. They release kind of a monthly newsletter, and they put out 10 new articles per newsletter, and those appear in their RSS feed by themselves. There's other things that I add to it. I keep the Chronicling America stuff because I'm part of the newspaper project. Knowing what the Library of Congress is doing about their newspapers is also pretty important. So that's on the list of things I keep track of. But you as a librarian probably will have different interests and different things that you want to keep track of. So I've got some suggestions on that one. So library-related RSS feeds to check out. One of them that's really interesting is actually the Library of Congress. We'll kick out to the Library of Congress for a moment. So the Library of Congress actually has a bunch of RSS feeds in different categories. So most popular, there's blogs, their news on the web. I find their copyright one to be kind of interesting. I subscribe to it for a little while, so you get some ideas, some articles kind of appear. There are some, each of these copyright ones is a different feed of information. So, you know, things about different particular rule sets that are in progress, laws, you know, stuff about different items going on. It's really interesting stuff. And this is a whole bunch of interesting things. You're going to find something here that interests you, whatever your particular flavor of librarian might be. This is going to be something that's interesting, including just the latest news of what they're doing, you know, which is really interesting. Some other ones that things I found is OCLC, God love them, has a whole set of things too about OCLC products. So it's one of those things that you want to be in the loop as to what's going on at OCLC. This is definitely a way of doing it as well. So there's a whole bunch of these too, and they split them out by services and products too. So if there's a particular product that you're interested in, you want to know more about their discovery services, and you want to hear news updates about that, you can subscribe to it. In this case, you'll notice that as I hover over the symbol for RSS, in the bottom left-hand corner, the URL that appears is an RSS feed specific for that. So this is actually going to be the URL that I want to use in my feed reader. So let's go subscribe to OCLC. So we add it here. So my discovery services, I'm going to put OCLC so I know what I'm talking about here. And I'm going to put it in the work blah category. So now I can see the most recent new interesting things that have occurred in OCLC and the discovery services. Like, so this one was published less than a minute ago and evidently not in English, but that's fine. Let's see about this web seminar. So that way I can keep up to date with all the new things going on with the various websites. So this is an example of how that would work. So I realize I've kind of glossed over a little bit of this because each of these feed readers is very different. It's kind of hard to describe how they're different. So for instance, here's a Feedly one I set up back when I was testing out Feedly. And I was trying to put into this one just the stuff that is work related, stuff that's professional related. So, you know, hacker news. I'm into IT security, so one of the things I need to be up to date on is hacker news. I also have the informed librarian stuff for us located here. So this was the October issue, or maybe it's the, I don't know if they published them at the beginning or the end of the month. It says October 31st, but I don't know if this was the one for November or not. Here's the feed for my network. And here's the last article that was written by Christy 20 days ago. And I also have CNN and stuff like that. One of the nice features about Feedly, and one of the reasons I think it's kind of cool, is that they actually have a catalog of an explorer type thing, so you can kind of explore around and find stuff. So if you're into food, here's some food stuff places, Serious Eats and cookbooks and the like. So those are some of the things that go with that. So, one of my suggestions for setting it up so that way you're not in the doom scroll cycle still is this idea that you can subscribe to just stuff that interests you. And most sites don't update super frequently. Stuff like Slashdot and CNN publish lots and lots and lots of articles per day. But if you're not into the volume, you can always just remove the channel. Like I've got CNN and I don't want CNN here anymore. I can remove CNN so I don't see that particular subscription anymore. I'm not seeing CNN anymore. I can just go into CNN and is it edit? I usually unsubscribe. Yeah, edit. There it is. I usually unsubscribe from the app, so I can delete CNN. So I'm not seeing CNN's news anymore. So, one of my suggestions is don't overload yourself. Pick 3, 4, 5 websites that you're super interested in, and then peruse them. If you feel like you need more, go find another website. Go find another interesting set of websites and throw them in there. You can tailor it to what level of news that you want. If you really want the big news, go for the big news. If you don't, that's fine. I love stuff like How to Geek because it's got all sorts of nerdy things. I'm a board game geek guy, so I have my Board Game Geek set up. So it's outputting news in the board game universe to me here. If you're into IT news, you can do that. Like I said, knitting, Ravelry probably has a new pattern list if you're looking for that. So there's all sorts of different options available. So that's kind of my my spiel. Oh, one last thing. I put at the end of this, and by the way, when we're done, I will take a copy of the video, make sure it's posted to YouTube. I will send you a link to where this slide deck is located so you can see these links yourself. One of the links that I wanted to share with you here is top 90 library RSS feeds. So this is a curated feed created by one of the feed reader companies, FeedSpot. And this has got a whole bunch of really interesting, or at least I hope will be interesting to you, interesting library feeds. Something from the Internet Archive, which is really cool. Keen Librarian Toolbox. Neat. I don't know what that is. I'm not a librarian. So there's all these different options here too. So there might be something interesting here for you to subscribe to, some interesting professional reading as well. So I'm gonna stop here and open it to some questions. I see there were some comments about the social media. Yeah, the trouble with social media, I feel like, is that you have trouble like seeing content from people with like interests a lot of the time. It depends on what you're using, I suppose. But yeah, I can definitely understand. I remember Facebook when Facebook was just people that were your friends or family, and that's all you saw. Now it's so inundated with, well, I imagine, based on what people have told me, it's so inundated with other stuff that if there was a way to tweak Facebook so I saw nothing but my family and friends, I might go back to it. It's a possibility. Yeah, and Brianna points out it's definitely harder not to use because some businesses don't have web pages, but rather use free Facebook pages. And I generally agree with that as well. This is a comment I have all the time, like local businesses, especially here in the North Country, put up stuff on Facebook. And so the only way that you can tell if they're open or closed or what the menu specials are or whatever is through Facebook. And I find that highly annoying as a non-social media user. So anyone have any questions or comments? You can unmute yourself and ask a question, or if you want to type it in, that would be okay too. I'm game for anything. Yep, libraries certainly do promote and market heavily using social media, but it shouldn't be the only way that they promote. Meaning, if you have a website and you're a librarian, there should be your current news going to your website too. Pretty please, sugar on top. Hey, Michelle.
Hey, nice to see you. It's been a long time. Maybe you covered this and I missed it. So when you brought RSS feeds up, I started kind of laughing because I know how old it is. And I was like, seriously? But you know, when things work, they work. But I guess my question is, obviously we can see a lot of what the future is, which is social media. Do you see anything technologically coming down the pike that you think would replace RSS, or do you think RSS is around for the long haul?
Well, interestingly enough, the social media sites also kind of sort of use RSS in a way. Most of the RSS feeds, I shouldn't say most, an awful lot of the RSS feeds also contain in them pointers to enriching metadata. So if, say, you're in Slack and you type in a link to something, very often Slack will go out and grab XML information from the website and pull it in, so you get a little thumbnail and a summary and a whatever. I see that, I feel like a lot of social media uses some of this older technology, especially the RSS and the site mapping, to kind of pull in extra data for their use as well. It's not going to go away fully, I don't think. It's just going to morph. And it already has started to morph. RSS used to be in a format called Atom, which was a metadata-esque format. And as the years have worn on, they've moved to XML as the primary format, because that whole concept of big data is all kind of wrapped around structured data. And so XML has become the de facto structured data of RSS. And I think that's going to continue. You're going to see more. It's not going to go away. You know, like every good technology, it fades and becomes part of the background, and other things are built on top of it. That's why the podcasting is a great example. That's a technology that was built on top of RSS that is now, you know, a whole new industry has kind of been built on top of an old technology, which is kind of interesting. What is easier to navigate, Google Alerts or RSS? You know, honestly, I don't use Google Alerts for a couple of reasons. First of all, I don't have a huge level of trust in Google. It's an IT thing. I just don't trust it. The other thing too is that I'm also always a little nervous about the longevity of a Google service. Alerts came about, I think, a little after Google Reader did, and I would not be surprised if Google Alerts doesn't disappear at some point in the future as well. I prefer RSS because the technology isn't dominated by a single vendor. Meaning, if I want an RSS feed reader and I don't like what Feedbin is doing, I can dump it and move on to a different service. And RSS is fed from all sorts of different sites. So if a site stops supporting RSS, I stop reading them and I move on to somebody else. So I prefer RSS, I guess. Michelle, you got your hand up again. Go for it.
Sorry. So, and this might be kind of a stretch, but you know, in thinking about social media and news and fake news, propaganda, et cetera, is there any implications that you've read in your research about using blockchain to track all of that information and where it's all coming from, to make a way to prove or disprove the reality and the reliability of what it is you're getting at? Just curious.
You know, I've not seen a lot about that. That's an interesting thought, though. For those of you that are not necessarily up to date on blockchain, the idea behind blockchain is it produces a essentially shared record of transactions. And the more transactions there are, the harder it is to falsify or change a record somewhere inside of the chain. And so, yeah, that's an interesting idea of combining it with sourcing of data. I've not seen
Maybe
a
we
lot
should
of
do
that.
it and make $1 million.
Hey, man, if we can figure it out, let's do it.
It just seems to me like, I know it's such a weird reach, but it seems like it might be a way to stop some of what's happening, or at least have better evidence for the naysayers who don't understand that what they're getting is not real.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Quick, copyright that. Trademark it.
I remember when Facebook came out and a grad student came to me, I was like, oh, check this out. And I was like, who the hell would use that? That's nothing. That's gonna disappear. That's nothing. You need to do your research on something else. Yeah, I was wrong. So I'm not the good forecaster.
Well, one of the things I put in the teaser for this training is like 52 or 54% of people in that particular survey of Americans said that they get their news primarily from social media. Often or more frequently get their news from social media. And I'm like, I can't imagine heading to Facebook thinking that that's going to be my best place to find stuff that's true. Even from a theory standpoint, like even in the old days when it was just my family and friends, I don't trust my family and friends to get things right. So I certainly wouldn't get my news from any of them. You know what I mean? But that's just not how people think.
Oh, but I mean, I go to Facebook because this is what I'm grabbing from there, though. I'll see the New York Times articles or other things that pop up, and then I go dig up more stuff. But I'm not sure that everybody is doing that. A lot of people are like listening to whack jobs that create memes and they think it's true.
Right. Yeah. And one of the things that that I think I have to put as a caution with RSS feed too is this the idea that you can skim really easily. I think that's also one of the things that happens with social media too, is that you hit whatever your news source is and you read the title of the article and you don't actually stop to read the full article. I think one of the things I like to do when I go through feed readers is actually like bring up the full article and then spend a little bit of time at least reading the article as presented. But I don't think I necessarily always used to do that with social media. I'm not sure if that's just me or if it's a shortcut that people will like to take. Oh, I've read a headline that says, oh, Joe Biden is eating babies regularly. And I just assume that's true without stopping to look at the article, maybe. I don't know. It's one of those things where it's a little hard to tell how people think about reading articles in detail or reading more information in detail. Yes, Taylor, you're absolutely right. I'm sure I've met some of those people. If it's on Facebook, it's got to be true, right? I also think that there's a certain level of unnecessary attribution. Like you generally trust what your friends tell you, unless you're me and I don't trust anybody. But if you don't, most people trust their friends or trust their family. And if one of your friends and family posts something that's really stupid, you have a tendency to believe it a little bit more because you trust the person who's providing you that information. And you really shouldn't, because who knows where they got that information from, or they just reposting it, and so yeah, it's weird that people like love that way. Thanks, Todd. So I guess with that, I don't have a whole lot more to share, and it sounds like we're pretty close to the end on questions. Thank you so much. I will send you an email. You'll have the slide deck and a little more information there, and then you'll also have my email, so you can give me a shout if you have a question. I'll be happy to help. With that, bye. Thanks. Have a great day.